welcome to today's deep dive. I'm really excited about this.
Oh, me too. It is absolutely wild.
Right. So for you listening at home, today we are exploring a thought experiment that honestly forces us to completely rethink our place on the food chain.
Yeah, our systems of government, our basic assumption that humanity is just, always going to remain the apex intelligence on Earth.
Exactly. And we're pulling this scenario from a genuinely fascinating text called Ocerina.
Which is such a brilliant read.
It really is. And our mission today is to just completely immerse ourselves in its central premise. The core question is this: what happens to global geopolitics, to economics, and basically to human society as we know it, if insects and arthropods suddenly undergo a phylogenetic leap to hyperintelligence?
Right, and for those who might be a little rusty on their evolutionary biology.
I definitely was.
A phylogenetic leap essentially means a sudden, massive evolutionary jump, and it happens simultaneously across an entire family tree of species.
So we aren't just talking about, like, a few really smart ants in a lab.
No, not at all. We are talking about a coordinated biological awakening across trillions of organisms all at once.
Trillions. Which is terrifying to even picture.
It is a brilliant premise because it completely subverts our standard science fiction expectations.
How so?
Well, usually when we picture higher intelligence, what do we think of? Giant, throbbing, oversized brains.
Right, like classic alien tropes.
Exactly. But if an arthropod, say a beetle or a wasp, developed a mammalian-style macro brain, their delicate chitinous exoskeletons would just tragically implode under the physical pressure.
Oh, right, because they don't have internal skeletons to support it.
Yes. So in this scenario, evolution takes an entirely different, much more practical path. It introduces a concept called eusocial cognitive resonance.
Eusocial cognitive resonance.
Okay.
So instead of isolated, individual brains developing inside each bug, hymenopterans, which is the scientific order encompassing ants, bees, and wasps.
Along with their distant arthropod cousins, yes.
Right. They essentially engineer a decentralized, pheromone-based neural network.
It is basically cloud computing, but biological.
Yes. Every single insect ceases to be just a mindless, instinct-driven worker. Instead, they become an ambulatory, foraging synapse in a terrifyingly efficient, massive subterranean supercomputer.
And you really have to picture how this begins for humanity.
Oh, the opening scene is so good. The event doesn't start with a giant flying saucer casting a shadow over a major city.
No, it starts quietly, right in your backyard.
The very first sign of this planetary evolutionary jump is a colony of leafcutter ants meticulously pruning a rhododendron bush.
But they aren't eating the leaves.
No, they are constructing a biologically functional chlorophyll-based radio telescope, and they have it aimed directly at the Sirius star system.
Which is just a staggering visual.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the moment humanity actually realizes what is happening, we are thrust into the most absurd, yet logically sound, diplomatic crisis in human history.
Oh, it is a logistical nightmare of a first contact. When we think of meeting an advanced intelligence, we imagine, formal state dinners.
Or a highly visible spaceship landing on the White House lawn.
Exactly. But the initial diplomatic contact with this newly formed arthropod coalition involves a lot of frantic, confused, sweeping by janitorial staff.
Frantic sweeping.
Yeah.
Because the first formal delegation doesn't arrive in a heavily guarded motorcade.
No, it is a delegation of Argentine ants marching in perfect unison right under the doorframe of the United Nations General Assembly.
Wait, but why the UN? If they possess this planetary hyperintelligence, why not target a global military installation? Or a major technology hub?
Or even the internet infrastructure, right?
Yeah, why march into a completely bureaucratic human meeting?
Because the hive mind recognizes human bureaucracy as our primitive version of pheromones.
That is such a harsh critique of humanity.
But it makes sense. To a eusocial network, the UN is the closest thing humanity has to a central hive structure. It is where we go to coordinate our collective actions, however inefficiently. What's fascinating here is how they actually deliver their message. The ants march onto the UN Secretary General's mahogany desk and arrange their tiny bodies to form complex hexadecimal codes.
So they completely bypass human language entirely.
They do. They communicate directly in machine logic. That is how they deliver their initial demands to the world.
And those demands are perfectly calibrated to expose the absolute fragility of human dominance.
They really are. They hit us right where it hurts.
They demand two things immediately. First, a permanent global seat at the UN Security Council.
Naturally.
And second, a total unconditional embargo on a production and distribution of all aerosol-based insecticides.
I want you, the listener, to really put yourself in that room. Imagine the sheer existential panic sweeping across human leadership in that exact moment.
It would be mind-blowing.
Right.
We suddenly realize that the trillions of tiny bugs we have been casually stepping on for millennia.
Swatting at picnics, poisoning with chemicals.
Right. They are now heavily unionized, and they are demanding historical reparations.
And we have absolutely no choice but to listen to them.
Because we suddenly realize they hold the ultimate leverage. They control the global food supply.
Exactly. It forces you to realize that human dominance is basically subsidized by trillions of unpaid pollinators.
If nature ever decided to send us the bill, our entire global economy would just collapse overnight.
And the text details exactly how that happens. The bees, who are the uncredited backbone of global agriculture, leverage their position immediately.
They form a global union called the Apoidia Cartel.
I love that name.
It's so good. And rather than petitioning for better conditions like a normal union, they just launch a flawlessly synchronized global strike.
They completely shut down production.
They demand controlling shares in all major agricultural conglomerates. And they require an immediate worldwide outlawing of neonicotinoids.
And for context here, neonicotinoids are those controversial neuroactive insecticides that, in our real world, are heavily linked to colony collapse disorder.
Right. So in this scenario, the bees essentially classify them as chemical weapons.
Which is legally sound from their perspective.
And their negotiation tactic is absolutely brutal. They withhold all cross-pollination until their demands are met.
Within weeks, humanity is plunged into a scurvy-ridden panic.
Supermarket shelves empty out. And while we are panicking about a catastrophic drop in vitamin C and staple crops,
the bees are just fine.
Yeah, these hyper-intelligent honeybees are calmly stockpiling premium, high-yield nectar in highly secure hexagonal offshore accounts.
The visual of hexagonal offshore accounts is just a brilliant nod to their biology.
It really is.
But the legal mechanisms they use to enforce this are what truly upend human society. Desperate human farmers are reduced to begging.
They have no leverage.
None. So they are forced into complex, legally binding contracts. But they aren't written on paper or digitally signed. They're physically drafted in beeswax.
But how does that even work practically? Under what human legal framework does a judge recognize a contract written in beeswax by a honeybee?
That is exactly where the human system breaks down. Human law is forced to bend to biological reality because the alternative is global starvation.
The courts literally have to recognize the beeswax contracts, no matter how bizarre the stipulations are.
And they are bizarre. The farmers have to guarantee the bees comprehensive dental plan.
Even though bees do not have teeth.
It doesn't matter to the hive mind. They understand the human concept of a premium benefit, and they demand it as a pure flex of power.
That is hilarious.
They also demand strict adherence to mandatory afternoon siestas. It is extortion, pure and simple, but it is perfectly legal under the newly established interspecies law.
And it doesn't stop with the food supply. Once our biological foundation is threatened, they move right on to our physical infrastructure.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the agricultural crisis is just the opening move.
Right, because while the bees are holding the global food supply hostage, the termites step up.
The termites decide it is time to execute a flawless, coordinated takeover of the global real estate market.
They form the Isoptera syndicate.
The age-old human fear of nuclear annihilation is swiftly replaced by a much more immediate structural threat.
The termites threaten a synchronized global effort to digest the load-bearing supports of every major metropolitan center on Earth.
Unless humanity agrees to a strict interspecies zoning treaty,
they actually issue formal eviction notices to entire cities.
New York City is forced to the negotiating table just to survive.
Just to stop the Chrysler Building and the Empire State Building from being reduced to piles of meticulously processed sawdust.
Human leaders have to cede the entirety of Central Park.
They hand it over to a sovereign coalition of ground beetles and earthworms.
And that fundamentally changes how humanity is allowed to build anything going forward. Human urban planners are forced into early retirement.
They're completely replaced by blind subterranean termite architects.
And these new architects view standard human load-bearing walls as highly offensive culinary insults.
Culinary insults.
Yeah.
They aren't just taking our buildings, they're critiquing human taste.
They force us to build structures that are geometrically pleasing to a hive intelligence.
It is a complete revolution of physical infrastructure. But the technological landscape is entirely rewritten alongside it.
It has to be.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the spiders, enter the global economy.
Oh, the spiders are incredible in this text.
Spiders recognize the immense commercial value of the tensile strength of their silk.
Which is true in the real world, too. Spider silk is incredibly valuable. It is proportionally stronger than steel and tougher than Kevlar.
But we have never been able to farm it effectively because spiders are solitary and highly territorial.
Right, they just eat each other. But under eusocial cognitive resonance, they cooperate.
They abandon their solitary lives of catching flies in our garages and establish elite high-tech material science startups.
A single golden orb weaver begins charging human aerospace engineers exorbitant consulting fees for access to structural webbing designs.
And, of course, she refuses to accept fiat currency.
Human cash is meaningless to a spider.
She demands payment entirely in genetically modified slow-flying moths.
It is a sharp commentary on the subjective value of currency. When you strip away the illusion of money, value is just about calories and resources.
These arachnid entrepreneurs go much further than just consulting on material science, though.
Oh yes, they literally rebuild global communication, using silken fiber optic cables that transmit vibrations at supersonic speeds.
The spiders weave a new, literal World Wide Web.
A physical web spanning the entire globe.
But how does humanity even interface with a vibrating silk internet? And what happens to cybersecurity?
Well, human hackers are rendered entirely obsolete in this new paradigm. You cannot hack a physical silk vibration with a keyboard or a line of Python code.
So the new cybercriminals are rogue parasitic wasps.
Exactly. These wasps act as biological hackers. They physically fly into the server farms and try to inject malicious genetic code directly into the physical silk nodes of this new web.
It completely becomes a biological matrix.
And that biological integration spills right over into the medical field, too.
Medical science faces an incredibly humbling revelation. For centuries, humans have used maggots in a really primitive way for wound debridement.
Just letting them eat dead tissue, yo.
Well, post-awakening, the maggots rebrand.
Big time.
They establish themselves as elite, highly sought-after microsurgeons. They operate in these coordinated, highly specialized teams.
And because of their scale, they can perform microscopic vascular repairs that clumsy human hands and our crude robotic tools could never even dream of achieving.
But naturally, since they are now the undisputed elite specialists, they demand absolutely outrageous medical copays.
The pharmaceutical industry gets completely upended alongside them. The catalyst here is the bombardier beetle.
To understand why this is so disruptive, you have to look at the real-world biology of the bombardier beetle.
It possesses two separate internal chambers, one holding hydroquinone and the other hydrogen peroxide.
When threatened, it mixes them together, creating a boiling, explosive chemical spray.
In this new reality, the beetle successfully patents that internal exothermic chemical reaction.
They use their own biology to synthesize novel, highly volatile medications that human labs just cannot replicate without massive industrial facilities.
And they don't even hire outside counsel.
The beetles act as their own volatile intellectual property lawyers.
They are incredibly aggressive litigators.
They openly threaten to detonate their chemical reserves right inside corporate boardrooms if any generic human manufacturers try to infringe on their patent rights.
Just imagine you are sitting in a high-stakes board meeting and your opposing counsel is a beetle sitting on the table.
Literally threatening to physically explode and cover the executives in boiling chemicals if you don't agree to their licensing terms.
This raises an important question. How could any human legal or ethical framework possibly survive this kind of pressure?
The short answer is that it doesn't.
No. The global legal system instantly buckles under the weight of this bizarre new reality.
We see a complete institutional collapse triggered by unprecedented civil rights lawsuits from the insect world.
Think about the sheer volume of litigation here.
Mosquito populations step up and file massive class action lawsuits against the human race.
Their argument is brilliant in its sheer audacity.
They demand blood tax subsidies. They argue in court that human hemoglobin is a natural resource, and because they've been symbiotically feeding on us for millions of years.
They have historical, generational rights to harvest it.
That completely redefines our concept of crime, liability, and even personal space.
Vehicular manslaughter, for instance, becomes an absolute legal minefield.
Imagine you are driving a Honda Civic down the highway at dusk. The windshield gets plastered with bugs.
Prior to the awakening, that was just a car wash issue. Now your windshield is a massive, multi-casualty crime scene.
Because every single bug on that windshield is a sentient citizen of the Arthropod Coalition.
When you pull over, microscopic forensic teams have to be deployed to your car.
They launch a full, exhaustive investigation to determine the exact nature of the deaths.
Were those deceased gnats just innocent civilian bystanders out for an evening flight?
Or were they radicalized anti-combustion kamikaze elements deliberately protesting human carbon emissions by throwing themselves at your vehicle?
You literally don't know if you've committed an accidental tragedy or survived an act of political sabotage.
The international laws of conflict have to be updated immediately to reflect this. The Geneva Convention is hastily amended to include a fly swatter ban.
The simple act of rolling up a magazine in your living room is now officially classified as the creation of a weapon of mass destruction under international law.
Which makes perfect sense when you consider what happens to the human military-industrial complex.
It is rendered instantly, embarrassingly obsolete.
We can't fight them, so governments try to hire them. Cockroaches, who are already famous for their biological resilience and ability to survive massive amounts of radiation.
They are heavily recruited, they become indestructible, six-legged private military contractors.
Governments completely stop wasting money building multi-billion-dollar armored vehicles. Why build a tank when you can simply deploy a tactical strike force of biologically enhanced, hyper-intelligent palmetto bugs?
And these aren't just tough bugs. A palmetto bug can survive a direct nuclear blast, walk right through the radioactive fallout into an enemy base, and subsequently hack into a mainframe using complex tactile inputs from their antenna.
It completely shifts the nature of warfare. Kinetic ballistics, shooting bullets and missiles at each other, becomes a primitive thing of the past.
Warfare becomes entirely about hyper-targeted biological sabotage.
Highly classified operations are launched where a swarm of digitized locusts is deployed to short-circuit an enemy nation's power grid.
They don't bomb the power plant.
They simply chew through the underground fiber optic cables in a perfectly synchronized Morse code rhythm.
It's a level of microscopic coordination humans simply cannot defend against.
That coordination stems directly from their societal structure, because their entire intelligence relies on social cognitive resonance, this collective planetary hive mind. Their values are the complete polar opposite of ours.
To a hyper-intelligent insect network, the human concept of individualism isn't seen as a fundamental right or a moral virtue.
It is viewed as a horrific, chaotic disease.
They look at humans and think we are fundamentally broken because we want to be alone.
Their societies operate with terrifying efficiency. It's like a massive governmental department where the employees have been genetically modified to never require a single moment of sleep.
There are no water cooler chats. There is no procrastination.
They coordinate massive planetary initiatives entirely through interpretive waggle dances and airborne chemical secretions.
It is a completely different way of existing in the universe.
Yeah.
And it fundamentally alters how they experience time.
Take the mayflies, for example. In the real world, mayflies are burdened with a biological lifespan of exactly 24 hours.
In this new hyper-intelligent epoch, they don't just live, mate, and die. They develop the most aggressively accelerated philosophical movements in the history of the planet.
A single mayfly scholar experiences birth at dawn. By mid-morning, it has a full-blown existential crisis.
By noon, it moves into a deep nihilistic phase.
After a mid-afternoon snack, it achieves profound spiritual enlightenment. And by dusk, it reaches peaceful acceptance.
And before they die at sunset, these mayflies leave behind heavily profound, incredibly dense philosophical treatises, intricately carved onto a single blade of grass.
It really highlights just how sluggish and inefficient the human lifespan actually is.
It perfectly highlights the massive cultural divide. The interspecies cultural exchange between humans and the Arthropod Coalition is just a tragic comedy of sensory mismatches.
Human art, our music, our literature, it is entirely incomprehensible to a civilization whose primary sensory inputs are chemical and tactile.
You cannot play Mozart for a bug and expect it to care about acoustics.
A human symphony orchestra means absolutely nothing to a dung beetle.
But to that same dung beetle, a perfectly fermented, geometrically spherical pile of compost is revered as an absolute masterpiece.
They view the chemical complexity of that compost pile on par with how humanity views the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel.
So to maintain vital diplomatic relations and ensure the food supply isn't cut off again, human politicians and our cultural elites are forced to participate in their art.
They are required to attend pheromone operas.
Picture the most elite, wealthy human dignitaries sitting uncomfortably in dark, damp, subterranean theaters.
There is no stage to look at, no music to hear. Instead, strategically placed vents simply release varying concentrations of formic acid and alarm pheromones into the room,
And the human attendees have to sit there, nodding thoughtfully.
pretending to deeply understand the heartbreaking emotional subtext of a tragic story, which is entirely about a worker ant who accidentally dropped a really good breadcrumb.
They have to fake crying over a chemical smell to avoid causing an interstellar diplomatic incident.
It is the ultimate humiliation for human pride, but a completely necessary survival tactic. So what does this all mean?
When you take all these bizarre pieces, the beeswax contracts, the biological internet, the mayfly philosophers, what is the ultimate outcome for humanity in this thought experiment?
The ultimate outcome is a profound and humbling existential demotion.
We are forced to accept that we are no longer the apex intellectual predators of Earth. We aren't the sole sentient tenants anymore.
And the psychological toll of that is staggering. You have to realize that you are statistically outnumbered 1,000,000,000 to 1 by microscopic geniuses who literally live under your floorboards and control the very infrastructure of your reality.
It leads to a total restructuring of human society. Doomsday preppers no longer build underground bunkers to hide from nuclear fallout.
Why would you dig into the ground when the dirt is entirely controlled by a super-intelligent hive mind?
Instead, humans start building elevated, glass-encased platforms. We just desperately try to get off the dirt.
We live in perpetual awe and terror of the highly organized ecosystems below us.
Local municipal governments are eventually taken over and successfully run by highly organized centipedes.
And they charge a mandatory 15% tax on all dropped kitchen scraps. If you drop a piece of lettuce off your glass platform, that belongs to the centipede IRS now.
The planet transforms into this bizarre, symbiotic utopia.
But it's a utopia that isn't managed by human politicians or human algorithms. It is entirely managed by the steady, rhythmic clicking of 1,000,000,000,000 calculating mandibles.
It's a complete paradigm shift that forces humanity to find a new, much smaller, much quieter place in the natural order.
It really is, and it makes you look at the natural world completely differently. To you, the listener, the next time you see a bug scurrying under your fridge or a spider spinning a web in the corner of your ceiling, take a moment to respect the sheer, untapped processing power of those tiny mandibles. Because if eusocial cognitive resonance ever kicks in, you were going to want to be on their good side.
You really are.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. It builds on the idea that these hyper-intelligent insects view human individualism as a chaotic disease. Ask yourself, if you really found yourself surrounded by a deeply connected planetary-scale hive mind humming under your very floorboards, what would actually happen to the human concept of loneliness?
That is a great question.
Would we cling desperately to our chaotic individuality, sitting alone on our glass-encased platforms? Or would humans eventually try to bridge that chemical gap? Would we seek to cure our own deep-seated isolation by begging to be assimilated into that warm, buzzing, eusocial cognitive resonance? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We've loved unpacking this incredible thought experiment with you.
Stay curious, keep exploring, and we will catch you next time.